If you get close enough to an abusive narcissist, you might end up feeling like they've somehow separated you from the very essence of you. But the good news is that you're still in there and you can get back to you. And we're going to start that process here and now by shining a light on the 5 manipulation tactics that so effectively steal your self-worth. And I don't know your story personally, but if you're watching this, I'm going to bet you're intimately familiar with the first tactic, which is keeping secrets. So you know that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach when you realize your partner's been keeping something from you? It kind of feels like a punch to the gut. You trusted them, and then bam, you find out they've been hiding stuff. And I'm not talking about the TV remote. We're talking about important stuff here. So here's one common example. So it could be something like secretly texting their ex, even though they swore up and down that they were done with them. And when you try to bring it up, they make you feel like you're the one being crazy or paranoid or jealous. But the truth is, they're just gaslighting you to cover their own tracks. Narcissists love to keep secrets. It's all about control for them. By keeping you in the dark, they get to pull the strings and call the shots. Because even if you feel like you know the truth, when you don't have the proof and you don't have the admission, you really don't have the control. So some of the secrets that they might keep might be hiding how they really feel, lying about their past, or sneaking around behind your back. And it's definitely not limited to those things, but those are some of the common ones. And every time they keep something from you, it chips away at the balance of power in the relationship. So suddenly you're the one who's always questioning yourself and doubting your own instincts. So dangerous. And of course, the longer you're in this, the worse it gets. So over time, all of those secrets and lies, they all start to add up. It ends up being, like I always say, death by 1,000 paper cuts. And all of these cuts are slowly eroding your self-esteem and your self-worth. You start wondering what else they're not telling you, and if you ever really knew them at all. And the worst part is you might start to blame yourself, thinking that if you were just somehow better, they wouldn't have to hide things from you. And trust me, they will be happy to reinforce this belief for you. And sometimes with a narcissist, the secrets go so deep that you might even feel like you're a secret, like they're hiding you and your relationship from other people. And I want to highlight a comment from one of you who has experienced this firsthand. I was a secret. I wasn't included in his life, and I felt it was so he could cut ties easily when he needed to. No photos, no connections. I once asked his brother's name, and he said it was just information. He wasn't comfortable sharing information after a couple of years together. I don't know about you, but that sounds a little fishy to me. After a few years together, I would expect to know my partner's siblings' names at the very least. But this whole story reminds me of a time when I was early in a relationship with a narcissist, and he told me that something was not my business. And the thing that was supposedly not my business had to do with where he was sleeping on certain nights. And I actually wish I could share that whole story because there's more to it. But if you've been through something like this, you already know the story all too well. My name is Christina, and I'm a narcissistic abuse recovery coach. If you can relate to these tactics and their impact on your self-worth, you might need a little support along your healing and recovery journey. So click the link in the description to learn more about how I might be able to help. Now let's talk about number 2, jokes at your expense. You know those little jabs and put downs that the narcissist tries to pass off as just joking? But deep down, those jokes, they really sting. Like maybe your partner takes a dig at your cooking skills in front of your friends, saying something like, yeah, they tried to make meatloaf last week and it was like eating a hockey puck. So then naturally you get upset, and when you do, they're all like, come on, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. But here's the thing about those kinds of jokes. They're kind of like a free pass for the narcissist to be abusive towards you in public, without the risk of being shamed for it. In fact, you're the one who will be shamed for not having a sense of humor if you don't laugh at your own expense. So not only are they being abusive with these jabs, but they're also encouraging you to jump on board and put yourself down too. And the more you accept this behavior, or worse, contribute to it, the more you start to believe that maybe there is something wrong with you, that you really are a bad cook or a lousy partner or whatever it is that they're poking fun at. You start second guessing yourself and feeling like you're not good enough. And the more you internalize those put downs, the more power your partner has over you. It really is an insidious form of emotional abuse because it's so subtle. But just because they're not outright insulting you doesn't mean that it's not hurtful. Those little jabs, just like the death by 1,000 paper cuts, they add up over time. And especially along with other abusive tactics, which are usually present, all of these things will start to poke holes in your perception of yourself. Now let's look at a couple of examples of such jabs from the comment section. My ex used to call me jerk or turd as a playful jab, but it's not fun to be on the receiving end of name calling. It almost felt like bullying. All I wanted was to give and receive love and affection from him. And another, I was called big nose and little child. And then it goes with, I'm just joking. Those are cute pet names. No, they weren't. So let this be a reminder to all of us that someone else does not get to decide what you think is funny. And I also want to add, listen, some people were brought up this way and they actually appreciate this kind of humor. But when it's one-sided, that's when it's a problem and it's just plain mean. All right, now let's talk about emotional blackmail. This is another abusive tactic that will, over time, attack your self-worth. So have you ever wanted to do something, or maybe you're in the middle of an argument and your partner drops a guilt trip on your lap? If so, you've experienced emotional blackmail. So maybe you're trying to set a boundary or express your own needs, and suddenly they hit you with something like, oh, after all I've done for you, this is how you treat me? Or, I guess you just don't care about this relationship as much as I do. And just like that, you're left feeling like the bad guy. See, that's the thing about emotional blackmail. It's a manipulation tactic that's designed to make you feel like you're responsible for your partner's feelings and actions. And so they're using guilt to pressure you into doing whatever they want, even if it goes against your desires or beliefs. And the more you give in, the more they'll keep using this tactic to control you. That is one thing about narcissists. If something does not work, they have a lot of tools in their toolbox and they will go from one to another. But the more something works, the more they will use it. So if you find yourself in this situation, over time, you're going to feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells so as to not hurt this person's feelings. And you might be terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing. If this goes on for long enough, you might even start to believe that you're a bad partner or a selfish person because your narcissistic partner has convinced you that their needs should always come before your own. It's an incredibly toxic dynamic because it puts all the responsibility for the relationship on your shoulders. And not just the relationship, but your partner's feelings. You become responsible for their happiness or their misery. And that's really not a fair position for anyone to be in. We should all be responsible for our own feelings and our own happiness. So essentially, just to drive the point home with all of this, what your partner is essentially saying is, I won't be okay unless you do what I want. And this is a way of absolving themselves of any accountability for their own actions or emotions. And the more you buy into that mindset, the more you're going to lose sight of your own needs and desires. Because really the first person you're going to think about before you do anything is them and not you. And here's some great advice from one of you in the comment section. Just because someone is attempting to make you feel like shit about yourself or guilty doesn't mean they're correct. And I think that's really important because sometimes we take things at face value, especially when it comes to feelings. If someone tells you that you made them feel bad, you don't want to gaslight them and say, no, you don't feel bad. And so you end up taking responsibility. But the tricky thing here and what makes this manipulation is that you're not actually responsible for their feelings. You are responsible for your actions. And whenever you're in a situation like this and it feels like a gray area, take a close look at your boundaries and whether that person is overstepping them, because usually they are. Usually they're overstepping your boundaries and making you feel bad about it. So if that's the case, this commenter is absolutely correct. Just because they're trying to make you feel guilty does not mean they're correct. So now I want to ask something of all of you watching this right now. If you can relate to this and you're done with all the emotional blackmail and games, comment below, I'm taking my power back. So now let's talk about isolation and how it attacks your self-worth. So if you can relate to having a narcissist throw a fit every time you want to hang out with your friends, this is a message for you. A narcissist who's trying to isolate you may say something like, "I can't believe you'd rather spend time with them than with me." And here's a case where we can see a combination of tactics, can't we? They make you feel guilty for even wanting to have a life outside of them. And that's a combination of emotional blackmail and isolation. A double whammy. So what do you do when you want to keep the peace? You start turning down invitations and canceling plans. You tell yourself it's just easier to stay home than to deal with all the drama that would come if you went out. And in a more subtle form of isolation, they may send the message that you can never talk to anyone about what's really going on in the relationship. So maybe they're not outright saying you can't talk to this person, or it would hurt my feelings if you talked to this person. But they are saying things like, our problems are nobody else's business. Or stop trying to make me look bad in front of your family. And probably in that moment, you don't want other people to have a negative opinion of this person. And you also know if you started speaking the truth that they would. So even when you're around other people, you feel like you can't use those relationships for the support you so desperately need. And without that support, the only voice outside of your own is the narcissist, who will gladly tell you that you're the problem. And the longer this goes on, the more you believe that that lie is true. And the more you believe the lie, the more control they have over you. And here's a comment from one of you who explains this subtle isolation very well. Covert narcissists are hard to spot, at least for me. And I feel like they can do more damage because no one else can see what they're doing behind closed doors. And so they side with the narcissist when things go south, leaving you feeling all the more isolated and questioning your own reality of what happened. Okay, so now let's talk about triangulation. This is another tactic that will absolutely destroy your self-worth. And I can tell you this is a manipulation tactic that was especially harmful to me when I was in a relationship with a narcissist. And I know so many of you have been hurt by this subtle yet highly effective tactic that can actually take on so many forms. So imagine you're having an argument and suddenly the narcissist brings someone else into it. They might say something like, "Well, my ex never had a problem with this," or "I was talking to your sister the other day and she agrees with me." And then naturally you're thrown off balance because it's not just a conversation between you and another person. They're bringing someone else into it and implying that they know what the other person's opinion is. And it's against yours. So if you can relate to this, you might be wondering what triangulation really is. And that's when the narcissist brings in a third person into the mix, usually to make you feel insecure or uncertain about your own thoughts and feelings. They might constantly put someone else above you or use someone else's opinion to undermine your own. It's a way of pitting people against each other and creating a sense of competition or jealousy. And this can make you start to feel like you're not good enough. You might feel like you don't matter because everyone else is always on the narcissist's side. Or you might feel like you're not good enough because the narcissist is always idealizing someone else and devaluing you. And now I want to share a couple of quick comments to sum up what it feels like to deal with triangulation. My ex-wife was a master at triangulating, always comparing me to other men. Very painful and devastating on my self-worth. And another commenter said, "My ex triangulated me with her ex-husband, with friends, with any male that walked the planet. It took me way too long to realize I was being set up for failure again and again. She was toying with me." And it's always nice to see that X part of it when you guys are explaining these manipulative tactics. Of course, it's not always easy, or for some people, not even possible to get out of these relationships, but things do get much better when you can. So if you're sick of being compared to others and feeling like you're not good enough, comment, "I know my worth," below. And if you can relate to all this and want to know how much of an impact these manipulation tactics have had on you, watch the video that's about to pop up on the screen to learn exactly how this type of abuse will change you. And if you haven't already, click that like button before you go, and I'll see you next time.